Internet, I'm HamsterBomb.
And I'm Zach.
And you guys are joining us for another episode of HITBOX, the gaming podcast where we talk about whatever we darn well please. Thank you very much. And today we are going to be doing something a little bit different. I know this is a little odd that just in the last episode of HITBOX we kind of started another side tangent mini-series of other episodes that we wanted to do, and we're doing the same in this one. We didn't plan on doing it this way. This is just kind of the way that it worked out. I'm actually having a lot of video problems off thing. We're not going to get into Adobe issues right now, why I'm kind of behind on making videos, and we had to pull something out of our butt really quickly this week, so here we are! Luckily, Zach is joining me, and we're going to be able to do a HITBOX episode for you guys of this new series. Hopefully you guys like this new idea. This is something that I've been thinking about for a while now, basically going back and revisiting a game that I have already reviewed, but giving it a full-length HITBOX episode to discuss it. And I let Zach choose for this one, and we are going to start doing this with Half-Life and Black Mesa, which are effectively the same game, kind of, sort of. We'll get into it. The way that I see this working is I'd like to go segment by segment of the way that I reviewed it in my series and kind of just talk about the game itself. And one more thing I want to mention as we're doing this before it gets a little too strange. You are seeing footage of Half-Life right now. Even though I am in the corner, I am not actively playing this at the moment. Zach and I are trying to focus on what we're saying. Also, it was getting a little weird trying to do recordings of the game itself while we are both over Discord trying to talk to each other. It wasn't really working out, so this is the best way we had it going. You're actually watching Zach play this in hindsight, so
yeah.
Regardless, that's what's going on. Just wanted to clear that up first and foremost.
I know this game. I can play it.
Yeah, we actually, just in a recent HITBOX episode, talked about how much Zach is into Doom. And at this point, when Half-Life came out, it was called a Doom clone. Because first-person shooter was not a thing yet. So that's just what we all called these kind of games. So, yeah, and I kind of see that, too. I don't think I ever mentioned that in my review at all, but so going through in order, just to kind of discuss things in the Playing With Myself theme of reviews, what I'm thinking of is we're going to talk quickly about, like, just the introduction of the game itself, first impressions, if that really matters to either of us, which honestly, I didn't have too much of first impressions to talk about this. In my video, I think I mostly just introduced more about the game because the intro itself was a skit. It was actually the first green screen skit I had ever done for Playing With Myself. Kim had actually, that was one of the hardest videos to do for Playing With Myself up to that point, because between episodes, Kim had to help me set up basically green screen colored vinyl on my doors of the closet that is directly behind me, and I had to try my best to light it correctly with sunlight, which, if you know anything about green screens, that's like a big no-no, but I did not have good lighting at the time, and that's all I had to work with. So it's a miracle that those green screens turned out even halfway passable, but I think it looked pretty decent. So that was like
the mother of invention.
Yeah, it ended up working out. It was a really, really hard one to do, but because I did that skit, I couldn't really talk about my actual first impressions with playing Half-Life or Black Mesa in the actual section that is called First Impressions. So, honestly, my first impressions of these, I never got a chance to play the original Half-Life for a long time. I knew of its existence, I knew of its importance, but it took a long time for me to actually get around to playing this game. And the first time I ever really completed the game was when I played Black Mesa, which was live on my channel in many segments. You can actually watch the entire playthrough of that in one of the playlists somewhere that you can find, shameless plug. But Zach, what about you? What are your first impressions with, I assume, Half-Life? Because Black Mesa, as we've disclosed off camera, Zach's got it, but he hasn't got a chance to really sit down and absorb the game just yet.
No, not yet. I've got a giant backlog I'm working through. I just beat Kirby and the Forgotten Land, and I'm about to beat Beyond Oasis, so got to get through a few more.
Yeah, the never-ending backlogs. We all understand that.
Yeah, but my first introduction to the series, I actually played the PlayStation 2 version of Half-Life first.
Yeah.
I didn't have good enough internet at the time, and I didn't have a Steam account, so I had no real good way to actually get the original PC version. So that's how I initially, got into the series, and I'm like, this doesn't seem all that cool. Why was everyone so into this? You know, and this is like 2000.
At the time, right, because this game originally came out in 98.
Right.
So you're saying you're playing it in, like, the PS2 era?
Yeah, this was like 2005 to 2008 is when I first started playing this. And, you know, of course, you know, after this, we've already had other games like its sequel, Half-Life 2's already out. We've had Halo 1 and 2. We've had a bunch of other games that came and went, but, you know, it just kind of made this game look a little bit weird to me at first, but the more I played it, the more I kind of got into it, and it's kind of awkward 90s charm, for lack of a better term. And
It's also very experimental and weird. And if you can isolate that, what would make Half-Life now look very underwhelming is the fact that you are having trouble, and I'm not, like, accusing anybody of this, but this is just something that Half-Life was so impactful in the video game industry that trying to just dissect it alone and just pretend that it didn't exist, I couldn't even imagine what games would be like today if this one groundbreaking game didn't happen. It did so much that, like, so many other games after it, we were just calling Half-Life kind of a Doom clone. Everything after this that basically did, like, live cutscenes aren't, like, pre-rendered videos, but you're a character actually walking around interacting in those, you could call those Half-Life clones. There's so many things that Half-Life does that are, like, groundbreaking and different that if you take away that context and go backwards, you don't realize that all the other games that you're playing, like Halo, or so many games, I'm not even going to get into list them all,
Right.
basically are just taking their inspiration from what Half-Life was, and that alone is so cool that you like, this one game did so many things for the industry, and then if you can just erase that part of it, it's just gone. I don't want to go too far into this. I know I've mentioned it a lot in my review already, but, like, this is just, like, one of those historic games that when you go back and look at it in isolation, yeah, it doesn't look very exciting because it's the first one doing those things. And in comparison to other things, what do you have? Stuff that maybe you're like Shin Megami Tensei, the closest you're going to have to a 3D environment is moving tile by tile or turning in, like, a maze.
Right.
This is, like, full 3D environments, and you don't load, like, a new level. You don't beat levels. The entire game, if it's loading properly, is one continuous shot. There's, like, one cut when you go through a teleporter at one point later in the game, and that's basically it. It's one long run, and that's incredible. All the cutscenes or everything, or the characters standing there, that's incredible. And I agree, the first time I saw this, I was so not impressed by it either, because of those same reasons. And I probably saw it around the same time frame. I think I was, I think it was a little bit later than when you experienced it in the PS2 era. Slightly later. I believe I was still in high school. And I, once again, was biased by modern games that I saw. I was like, I've seen other things that are doing the same thing. Why is this one special? And it's the context, I think, is what makes Half-Life so impressive, especially on its first impression run at the time. And you got to retain that, too. Black Mesa, however, is probably a good transition, has a completely different level of its first impression because it's actually taking that core design and trying to bring everything up to more of a modern era of, like, what it would look like. However, something kind of important about Black Mesa, this was basically an enormous mod that was made from a re-release of Half-Life that Valve did called Half-Life Source, which was made for the Half-Life Source engine. And I believe this was started in, like, 2005, and over the course of, like, 15 years, the team who was working on basically customizing this mod and trying to bring it up to snuff, because a lot of people were saying, like, yeah, I mean, they ported it to the Source engine, but it's lacking a lot of features, it needs some improvements, and it's just not, you know, something about it's just not quite what they had envisioned. So this group of modders, calling themselves the Crowbar Collective, decided to work on this and just try and add mods and patches to that existing game from 2005, by the way, and just bring it up to modern standards, adding all sorts of new lighting, just making the models and everything look nicer, cleaning up audio, adding new music, sometimes even brand new levels and environments. And that's what Black Mesa is. It's like And what's really great about this is Valve was totally cool with this. So it's kind of like the biggest official mod of any game, especially the one with the longest development time of any game that I've ever seen before. I don't know about you, Zach.
Yeah, no, I was going to say it was in development like not even a year after the original Half-Life 2 released. So
Right.
So it's like, we didn't even get all the cool bells and whistles from eventual like episodes 1 and 2 of Half-Life 2 or what we would get from the Portal games. So they're trying to have to build on top of all that as well. And yeah, no, I know Valve is a little bit open when it comes to their properties, and that's what I want to touch on when we get to the sell it, rate it part of this video, is that they're really cool with like the modding scene and all that. So they're like, yeah, sure, hey, this looks really good. Do you actually want this to be official and sell it on our store page? So it's like, I just think that it's really cool that they gave them a chance and the ability to be able to put this out there and, just for the world to see and for them to get the recognition that they deserve for working on this.
Absolutely. I don't want to call certain companies out for doing the opposite, but man, does it make me sad when I see really, really cool fan mods or projects of existing IPs that belong to other developers getting snuffed out, getting takedown notices. It's just kind of sad because these people are working really hard. They know that they don't own these projects, but they love them, and they're trying to do their best to do them justice in a modern age, or just get more people interested in them, or just add different features that they believe should be in the game. And honestly, when we go back to the original Half-Life, there's a lot of features that really could be brought up to the modern age. And as we're seeing right now in this footage that you're watching right now, this probably just looks like a really old, terrible Call of Duty-like game. If you're just looking at it completely with no context, you don't know anything about Half-Life, why it's special at all. And hopefully by the end of this episode, we'll be able to shed some more light on that if I was not able to in my review, which hopefully I was. I tried my best. It's kind of hard because there's so much involved with what this game was. And maybe this is good transition time so we can actually start talking about the gameplay of Half-Life, as well as Black Mesa and the updates that it has done, of which there are numerous ones, and I'm probably not going to get into them. We kind of touched on the fact that they were really just tinkering with things and kind of updating mostly level design and adding more to the content of the game. I don't know if there was like actual weapons and stuff that they added that might have been new. I can dig into that. We have some information that we can pull up at the moment, but generally, though, Zach, how about you tell us a little bit about like what establishes Half-Life in terms of its gameplay that is making it stand out, not only just in 1998, but now?
All right. Well, the first and the biggest thing I wanted to really mention is that the whole time you are playing, control is never completely taken away from the player.
I love that.
Yes, everything is constantly in the first person. Everything happens around you as you are moving. So it's like it doesn't wrench control away from you to play out a cutscene like you would in like, I don't know, like a Call of Duty or Battlefield or anything like that, where the narrative happens around you. It's not an omniscient story that's happening, from an omniscient storyteller, but it's just from Gordon Freeman's perspective, this bespectacled 27-year-old astrophysicist, like nuclear scientist, and he's like, yes, I know how to wield a gun, aliens, help.
And, another thing that's interesting about that, when you give the player that much freedom, you can just walk away from a scientist who is giving you directions on what to do. Or you can hear someone down the hall who is calling for your help, and you can just leave. Yep. Or you could pull out a gun and shoot them. There's so many, the freedom that this game lets you have is just kind of nuts. And at the time, it really felt ambitious, just where so many games would even take away your control when the credits are going by. But instead, in Half-Life, you're riding in a tram going to work, and you can walk up and look around the tram and see all the inner workings of Black Mesa, the facility. The facility is called Black Mesa, yes, which is where the name derives of the semi-remake, so let's be clear on that so that you know where that name comes from. So you're actually seeing all this crazy stuff moving around, and that's the beginning of the game. It's already teaching you, we're not going to hold your hand. If anything, quite the opposite. Go find your own way forward. And if anything, that's actually my favorite part about the gameplay. I know that the way that it lets you feel so free, and like you can kind of go and do whatever you want, it's never going to stop you. I think some of my favorite moments of the gameplay of this game were bits where you, as a player, feel like you had to figure out your own way out of a situation where, say, you had to sneak through a grate in the wall, bust your way through another room by shooting out the glass in the window or something, jumping through that, going through another door. Like, you're constantly just, like, moving through areas thinking, is this gonna work? Oh my gosh, I can't believe there's a whole other area past here. And that's actually the way forward. But the whole time you're playing it, you feel like you're escaping a scene, and it's almost like the immersion is so good. There's moments in Portal and Portal 2 that do this really well. Clearly the same team. Who, like, there's bits where you're going, like, clearly off, what feels like off script. Because in Portal, for example, you are clearly in testing facilities. White panel walls, clearly you're supposed to be in a certain area. And Half-Life, for the most part, does that too in some sections. You feel like you're in an office space, you know, you're in like a testing facility. And when you suddenly go through like grates in the wall and there's just like wires sticking out and there's like, you know, fencing stuff everywhere, like ladders, and you're clearly back where like maybe only the janitor would ever go, and you find weird ways through the walls and you're just like trying to squirm your way out and escape. But that's actually the canonical way forward. But the whole time you're playing it, you feel like you're just doing some crazy action movie escape, and it feels so I don't know what the word is. It's almost like it's completely up to your own devices how to get out, when really there was just one. And I don't know how you design games like that, but it is such a shame that we don't get more from this team, because it's insane what they were able to pack in Half-Life. And it's something I think it can only express better if you play the game yourself.
Yes. Yeah, no, because I was going to say the thing about it is that, yeah, it gives you that feeling that you're literally crawling through the underbelly of a secret government facility, but the illusion is that there's only just one route forward. It's a very linear game. But the fact that, like I said, you never leave the first person's perspective, and like you said, if you want Gordon Freeman to be a psychopath and just like, it's like, oh, it's the end of the world, I might as well just pull out my shotgun and just start blasting. Or, you know, if you actually want to help out Barney number 317 in order to get past all the aliens, you know, you can do that. And the other thing I do want to mention too is that the other thing that, you know, for me, like, especially in a first-person shooter game, it's usually about like the weaponry that you get in it too, and that is one thing that I really do like this series, or this game in particular, for, because at first it's very typical. You know, you get your melee weapon, which is a crowbar, which I think is absolutely hysterical.
Well, it became iconic later. A lot of games would also make homage to this. The first weapon you get in BioShock is a plumbing wrench.
Yeah, exactly, right. And then, you know, you get your standard pistol, shotgun, you know, automatic weapon. But then later on in the game, you get these really weird out there, like, science fiction weapons, like the gluon gun, which you can charge up and send out like a laser beam. And then there's the one, where...
Actually, is the hive hand specifically from Black Mesa? I think there were some items that were added just from that. I'm not positive offhand, as I mentioned before, but
right.
No, I think the hive hand was in the original.
Yes, the hive hand is in the original, because I think it's after the first set of grunts you kill that they drop their weapon and you can pick it up and you fire bees at people.
Yes, I love that it's like this living thing. It is an alien. And Gordon Freeman's first instinct when picking this thing up is to jam his hand in its rectum. It's the only thing I can describe it as. He sticks his hand right up there, and the thing clearly does not enjoy this. In Black Mesa, they animated this so well. And he just starts squeezing something up there, and it spits out little babies, and that's the weapon. That's just genius. I really love that a lot of first-person shooter games from this point on are going to use Half-Life's initial methods as, like, inspiration. Okay, we're going to start with maybe a small melee weapon. As we mentioned, BioShock will do this. Then give them, like, a pistol. You might want to be able to upgrade that to have, like, a slightly better pistol. You can have a shotgun. Usually there's, like, a heavy, there's a light, and then they give you variants of those things. The sniper is usually, like, midway. It's almost like Half-Life. Now, other games have obviously had shooters, and they level up what kind of weapons you have. But, like, Doom is outrageous, crazy stuff from the get-go. Versus Half-Life, which is kind of setting that standard of, how it's all going to work. And then later you start getting the outrageous stuff, like we were mentioning with the alien-based weaponry, which really, I think, sets not only Gordon's character, but also kind of defines where the game is going. Because we'll get to this in the story. I feel like the game was intentionally set up so that it grounds you in reality in order to make sure that you are as immersed as possible, which that first-person gameplay is cementing into you, because there was nothing like this at the time. This is so immersive, and then that way, when it starts getting crazier, when the government comes in and they're trying to wipe the place clean and kill all the witnesses, and the aliens are coming in, and then you go into their world and you're shooting their weapons, like, that immersion, hopefully, has never left you, and you really feel like you have gone on that journey.
Yep.
That's the most solid your gameplay could ever be, if its immersion is keeping you up that high. And I think that's what really sells Half-Life's gameplay, personally.
No, and I agree with you. It's the thing that I like about this, which I've looked into a bit, is that, yeah, in the original version of the game, there are loading screens, and because there's only a certain amount of memory per level that you could use for the original levels in the Quake engine, which is what this game is built off of. Some of the Quake engine, some of the Quake 2 engine, and a bunch of stuff Valve put in there themselves. But there's only so much memory that is allowed per level. So what they had to do is just basically create each level and just string everything together throughout the whole thing. Which I'm like, you know, you figure that someone would have tried to have done this before Half-Life decided to do it, but no, it's just something that they just came up with, and it's just like, yeah, that it makes so much sense in hindsight. And, you know, it adds, like you said, that extra level of immersion, because you're going, like, from the research facility at the bottom of the base up to top side of where the government has sent in the hazardous environment cleanup team, aka dudes with guns, to get you, which forces you back underground to get away from them. And then, like you said, it's just madness by the end. And it's crazy. So fun. Yes.
And what's really cool about how that's all strung together, and like you said, each one is an individual level, you don't even notice, because as you are witnessing this, and even in Black Mesa, you'll see the same thing. You'll reach a point where you get to like the entrance of a sewer or an archway or some sort of, like, you went down a ladder or you went up an elevator. You're going to get a bit of a loading screen, but you're going to still see where you're at, and then it's just going to snap back into gameplay and it'll keep going. Almost as if, okay, there's a big zone coming up and it's just going to load that section, which is assumingly what the player sees.
Yeah.
But you don't realize it's loading a brand new area, and the other, like, that's like level 5, and you were in 4. So it's working in the same mechanics that it had before, but it felt like it was so much grander than that. That's what's really cool about it.
And the fact that you could actually go back, like you could backtrack, and the level will just load up, and it'd be like, oh yeah, that's right. Oh, so this is everything that happened. Yeah, you can come back this way, and then you can go forward and backwards freely, you know, until the level dictates, oh yeah, this is a point of no return. Have fun. But it allows you to do that.
Another thing that's pretty cool about how the game functions, actually two things I want to mention. You can actually get help. I don't think I've mentioned this in my review at all, but there are people who you will meet along your journey, some security guards, maybe some scientists that have like been cooped up and like trying to hide out from all sorts of monsters. I don't even think I've gotten to discuss like in depth like the craziness that is like the head crabs, and there's so many like cool creatures that are in the Half-Life world. But we'll get into the story when we get there. But you have the option to protect these people, and they will then kind of be backup for you, at least temporarily. They won't follow you through the entirety of the game, but they will still help you up to a certain point if you can keep them alive. And it's kind of like a cool incentive for, and also kind of making it feel like this is kind of like a zombie movie or something. You know, you're playing your own action film, and it really is up to you to protect these side characters. If you screw up right away, you screwed up right away. They are dead. That character is dead, and maybe they can't open a certain door for you later that will get you extra goodies because they had, I don't know, maybe a certain security key that Gordon doesn't know how to use, and they would have gotten you to some extra segment. And that's really unconventional, the way that it like really opens up like that and lets you to do so much. Another thing that the game does that's really odd is it handles bosses in a super strange way. Now, bosses are something that are more like a modern staple, and we understand how they work. Back then, especially in shooters, it was kind of just open. The fact that you could run around in a first-person environment and shoot stuff was kind of cool enough. But Half-Life kind of goes a little bit farther than that. Granted, the original bosses in the first Half-Life game are a little underwhelming, in my opinion. Black Mesa does a spectacular job at making them both, like, larger than life, way bigger than they ever were in the original Half-Life, which, I mean, for the most part, is everything that Black Mesa has done. But still, I find the inclusion of bosses like this just so cool.
Yeah.
Like, what do you got? Like I forgot the name of the testicle crab. Like Goma.
Gonark.
Gonark. That was it. Yeah.
Yeah. The mother head crab. Yes.
Yeah, the mother head crab. So Gonark has this amazing segment in Black Mesa where, for the most part, everything involving Zen, which we'll get to the story in this, is basically the end game of the original Half-Life. You basically go straight into the alien world itself and have to take down the force that is holding open the portal, allowing the invasion to occur, and you got to destroy it. And on that journey, you have to deal with, yes, the giant head crab mother, or whatever, the queen, something like that.
Yeah.
And in the original Half-Life, now, Zach, you've got more experience than me, but
Yep.
I've seen that fight, and it's not exactly very...
No, not really. Yeah, and that is one thing I will say for the bosses, like, and the combat in general. Like, I love the weapons and I love the design and the fact that you have a lot of tactical freedom for like the moment-to-moment gameplay. But when it slows down and you're just kind of going one-on-one against some of these creatures, the thing I will say is that they handle the bosses more like puzzles than actual like fights in the original.
Yes. Now, Black Mesa has like 2 to 3 segments with the Gonark boss before you even get to the real fight itself, which none of that was in the original Half-Life. You have like running segments where you've got like destructible things you gotta escape and slide and get your way out of the thing's path trying to destroy you.
Right.
There's like mini boss segments where, yeah, you're trying to figure out how to avoid the situation or like get it to take environmental damage or something like that. Get stuff to fall on it. I believe you get stuff to fall on it. It's kind of been a while. But then later you get to a point where you actually are in an open area and you have to just take it down with what you've got. And it is so much stronger than what it was before. And it's a real battle. And it feels like it. It feels heavy. It feels powerful. And it's really impressive, especially compared to, I mean, of course, I'm comparing a game that was literally just released a couple years ago to one that was released over 20 years ago.
Yeah, 1998. Yeah, because unfortunately, from what I understand, towards the end of development, Valve was just running out of time. So
yeah.
A lot of
Which
stuff...
is a shame because it was building up so much to Zen, you know, the big ultimate climactic ending. And I guess that's a good transition to what the original Half-Life does at the end of Zen. It's basically a kind of a 3D platforming segment, and it's kind of visually underwhelming. The music's not so great. And this is where Black Mesa soars. It's gorgeous.
Right.
There's so many screenshots I've shown just of the game itself, and it's just the way it moves. The music is... Oh, we'll get there. And it's just so outstanding, and it is so much bigger. From my understanding, the amount of time it takes you just to complete Zen in Black Mesa, you could have completed the entirety of the original Half-Life in that time. It's that much bigger and grander. So it's almost like they were trying to do it justice of completing what the original was setting out to do with Zen, or what we kind of really wanted to see out of Zen. And that's where Black Mesa really becomes its own thing. It's not just taking straight models and rebuilding from the ground up. Half-Life is more of the historic original version of this concept. Black Mesa is restoring that and then adding a lot of modern inspirations to it.
Exactly, yes. So, like, which I think probably, since you were talking about how gorgeous this new game looks in comparison to, like, the way the old game looks, might be a good segue to graphics, unless if there was something else you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, what's really funny about the graphics and how they progress, you can really see when you play Black Mesa that this is a game that has been worked on for about 15 years, because you see from the beginning, it's close to what the original looks like. It's a lot better, don't get me wrong, but it's still, like, pretty close. And then by the time you get to Zen, there's, like, this very slow incline of the game getting better and better and better. The lighting gets better even, it seems. It looks better. It sounds better. It's just so good. Because they were working on the game from beginning to end, because that's just the way Half-Life works. It is one long, straight run.
Yep.
I say straight, but boy, is it winding up and down and into weird corridors, and we covered it. But still, that's what's so cool about it. And you can actually see the graphics improving as you play the game. And that's what's really interesting about how Black Mesa works in terms of its graphics. And it eventually does get absolutely gorgeous. It becomes clearly like modern day wallpaper, like 4K worthy. It's beautiful. The original Half-Life, of course, it's an old game. It's from '98, but still, for the graphics at the time, they're really nice. Really, really nice.
Yeah, so the thing I like about the leap from like earlier stuff like Quake and even Quake 2 to Half-Life is the fact that things actually have a skeleton. Like all the models and everything in the game actually has like a rig that they actually use to animate things properly. So that way when characters talked or moved or walked, even as janky as they kind of looked back then, the models themselves, like the textures, didn't warp all over the place. So they actually had consistent looking models. They still had consistent, just a sort of baseline consistency throughout the game. Unlike if you look at the original Quake, like if you just watch one of the monsters, like the ogre, the chainsaw ogre in the original Quake, just in his idle animations, you watch as his skin kind of warps and moves around the various vertices on the model, which adds to the overall like creepiness of the original game. But
yeah, definitely, but it's not intended.
Right, exactly, which is something that I think Half-Life really did. And what Half-Life, I think, also really took from other shooters, like, say, Duke Nukem 3D. Duke Nukem 3D was one of those games, one of those early pioneers, where they really wanted to try to push a very grounded reality in that game as well, where it's like you're in Los Angeles, you're going through the dingy side alleys and the mega complexes and all that stuff. Like, you could tell you're in a city block or a movie theater, where Half-Life kind of took that concept. It's like, okay, we want to set this in a government secret facility with weird science fiction elements and such. And I think that's really helped cement, that kind of move away from like these weird like non-connected levels, these esoteric places, to something a lot more grounded that we would eventually get even in stuff like Halo or early Call of Duty.
Yes, definitely. I think when you're just like looking at it a modern standpoint, going back at the original Half-Life, it didn't age honestly that badly. The only parts that I think are kind of off-putting are basically the end of the game, which we kind of covered. It's about where it's kind of fallen apart. The final boss looks a little silly in the original. But I mean, just as a comparison, we really need to put this into perspective here, because we have not gotten up to 1998 in our years through video gaming episodes of HITBOX. So just to put this in perspective, I'm going to list some games that came out that year, and just think about them in the context of Half-Life, and in your head, think, what looks better, okay?
Okay.
So, Banjo-Kazooie. That's one of the best-looking N64 games. I love the look of that game.
Yes.
Half-Life looks miles better than that. Now, obviously, it's not running on an N64, but it looks miles better than that. How about we jump consoles? We go to the PlayStation. Metal Gear Solid.
Oh, Lord.
Half-Life looks miles better than Metal Gear Solid, and I love the look of Metal Gear Solid. That game looks incredible. But, like, Grim Fandango. Yeah, this game, it's... I hope I'm making myself clear. Like, Half-Life, if you isolate... like, just the time frame of what we're looking at here. This is one of the best-looking games of the year, hands down.
Well, heck, even The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. I love the way that game looks. Yep, but I think Half-Life is crisper and looks nicer than Ocarina.
Yeah, you have Resident Evil 2, you have Fallout 2. There's a lot of big stuff that we're seeing in that year. We're going to get there when we get there, but just graphically, just keeping that in context, Half-Life is just crazy, like, what they were able to pull off in this, especially in a reused engine. I find that another thing that's, especially when in terms of graphics, you got to keep in mind, like, if you're just, like, straight up taking one thing to another, the graphics can, like, usually be hindered by whatever the previous thing was. You know, for example, let's jump way ahead to Metal Gear Solid 5. You know, when you're building your own engine for a game,
Yes.
I believe Resident Evil 7 had the same thing. When you're building your own engine specifically for a game, it's going to look like as good as that year can produce.
Yep.
And Half-Life's not even doing that, and it's still blowing everybody out of the water graphically.
Yes, yeah, because they used, from what I understand, Quake 1 as the base. They took some elements from the Quake 2 engine, but then they just kind of built on top of that base. So yeah, it's still going to be limited by the technology that id put into those games, or to those engines rather. But still, you know, taking what they had, that's still really, really good with what they had.
Right. The only complaints I could really say about it are completely unfair because they weren't even concerns or things at the time at all, which Black Mesa is bringing into light. So things like, say, baked lighting. If you know what baked lighting is, it's basically a way to make the 3D light in a 3D environment in a game look believable quickly. You actually render onto the textures what the light looks like. And then instead of actually having active light in the room, you just basically tell the game, okay, save what those textures look like right now, and just load that as the texture. Don't actually put the light in the room. That way, so, say for example, you played a game where like you walk in front of a light source and you don't cast a shadow, then you have baked lighting, right? If you have someone who walks around with a flashlight and it's not actually moving, right? Or it's something weird kind of works with it, then you're just moving around baked lighting. Obviously, for Half-Life to even function, it needs baked lighting. But when you move over to Black Mesa, that's when they start taking advantage of the fact that this is kind of a sci-fi horror game. And they want you to go in dark, creepy areas with sometimes just a flashlight. Or maybe you have like certain lighting sources that are like static. Maybe something's broken through the ceiling and you got like a lamp on its side. And that's like perfectly lighting up the shadows of the enemies that are coming around the corner. That's solid. And you can't obviously do this in the original Half-Life, but you can pull it off when you have better graphical fidelity, when you really spend your time on this, because lighting is one of the things that takes up the most amount of resources in a game nowadays, because you're not just baking it anymore. Baked lighting looks terrible. Monster Hunter still does it, and I hate it. So there's, I don't know, maybe I pay attention to this kind of stuff because I've helped develop games before, and whenever I see people cheaping, like, cutting corners and stuff like that, it really doesn't look good. Now, obviously, when it's old enough, Half-Life, where I even have to bring something up like that, then, yeah, it's just, I don't know, showing off how good Half-Life already looks, where the only things I could say to make it look better is basically release the game at a later point, you know?
Well, a bunch of modders took your advice, apparently, and they did just that.
Yeah, they certainly did, and if anything, they also redesigned so much of it, which is something that, I don't know how you feel about this, the fact that they straight up designed new levels, really, to add into Zen, to add in the middle of the game, too. We'll get to their own music, because there are two different soundtracks here. They're not the same.
Right.
And I honestly really like what they added. I haven't played through the entirety of the original Half-Life. However, I've seen full playthroughs. I've seen speedruns. I've seen all sorts of stuff of it. I feel content, at least, talking about it and discussing it in full. But I haven't really had the ability to compare, okay, this level that I played in Black Mesa was not in the original. This was... How do you feel about them adding new stuff?
I don't mind, to be honest with you, because, I mean, if you're going to remake something as classic as Half-Life, at least if you can put your own spin on it and it serves its purpose in just trying to help elevate the game overall, that doesn't bother me as much, because, yeah, there are some, like, really quiet moments in the game, and there are some frustrating moments in the game, in the original, like the teleportation puzzle that you go up that spinning shaft in to get to the Lambda compound in the original.
Yeah.
Oh, God,
I remember there are some puzzles that I really did not like in Black Mesa that I was told over chat were just in the original, and I was told, trust me, they're much better now, they're not as bad, and I was still kind of frustrated, so I can already imagine. Yeah, that's actually because of instances like that is why I'm going to jump a little bit ahead. Why I did not give either game a perfect score in any regard. However, they were close. They were very close. Okay. But still, you know, graphically, I kind of think we've said all it really needs to be said about both of these games. I think they both look very good for their time, which is fine. I mean, that's honestly not why people are all about them. Maybe Black Mesa is probably at least what gets people talking about it more so because it just is a prettier Half-Life. But one thing that is definitely consistent through both of these games is the story. They did not change anything about that. So when they add new levels and content for the game itself, none of the story changes, which is really the only thing that would have, I think, bothered me as a fan of the original Half-Life when they're making a mod or a remake. That is basically it. So, probably a good transition right now. Let's actually talk about the story. So, the original Half-Life and Black Mesa, both the same thing. You are Gordon Freeman, as we mentioned. You are just going to work and you're late. And once you get suited up in your, what's the suit called? I was going to say HEV. I was going to say PED suit, but that's from Metroid.
Yeah.
So, so you get
hazardous environment variation suit. Yes.
Right. So you get all suited up, and basically your job after you talk to a bunch of guys, which we mentioned at the gameplay, you're walking by your colleagues at work. You can microwave somebody's meal until it explodes. You can chat with people, and you go basically establish that real world, semblance in that immersion, and you go into whatever the heck your job is. It's almost like a giant hadron collider or something like that. You push some giant lever thing, and all of a sudden some electric starts shooting out, the machine's going haywire, and somehow a giant portal opens up, and many little portals are opening all over the facility, and aliens start rushing through after you have this weird vision of, like, seeing whatever was on the other side of this, which are a bunch of Vortigaunts as a species of alien that are going to come in and start invading. And for the first, I'm going to say, like, third of the game, this is basically the fear. You're suddenly invaded by aliens that you just let in accidentally from another dimension, destroying and wrecking havoc of the place. There's head crabs that are these giant, basically like parasitic face huggers from Alien that will latch onto your head, and I believe they keep their victim alive and like parasitically control them like zombies.
Yes, sir.
Oh, it's just messed up. You can even hear, I believe you can even hear the person growling on the inside. Like, Black Mesa made this so much more demented.
Yes, you can actually hear the person crying underneath as through the pain. Like, you'll hear them shout as you shoot them or smack them with the crowbar.
That's awful. But yeah, you start really with nothing. You find a crowbar, have to swat your way through head crabs and keep these things off you. It's really that suit that you happen to be wearing that's helping you so much. You're able to recharge it for power throughout the game. You get more weapons so you can deal with bigger aliens that show up, and eventually, I would say the second act of the game, the government gets wind of this, some secret service group that is probably your employers, and they come in, realize you guys all done screwed up, and they're going to try and completely wipe out any and all witnesses to whatever the heck happened here, because it is not going to be their fault. And that's why they start hunting down even the scientists, not just the aliens, including you. So now, basically what's going on is what few scientists are able to survive, the security guards, what we mentioned before, they're hiding throughout the facility, which is being attacked basically from an intergalactic war from two sides of the human agents and Secret Service people who are attacking the aliens who are invading, as well as both sides are trying to kill whoever is surviving in the inside, and you're basically caught in the aftermath trying to live and escape. And for the most part, that's the rest of the game until you get to a safe haven where you have a lot of scientists. And from this point, I did put a spoiler warning in my original video, because for the most part, all I've really told you is all you really need to know about the rest of the game. Both of them, either one which you would want to play. Below, we're going to have a little skip time that you can jump to, so you don't have to listen to me talk about the ending if that kind of stuff bothers you. But granted, this is a game from '98, so...
You've had plenty of time to play this.
Yes, you did. We warned you. So you get to a point where you have found like a safe haven for scientists. I believe you just recently brought a couple of them there, and they were trying to navigate, particularly you, to get there for them because I believe it's because you're wearing the suit and you're probably trained for how this new device is that they're working. And their plan is, from what they've devised, is these portals are being held open by some sort of entity. They don't know what it is. They just know that it's on the other side of one of these portals. And you bring them something that is basically powerful enough to open this portal, shove your sorry butt in there, and they say, just please deal with that thing so those portals shut and these guys stop trying to come in and kill us. Yeah. And that's the only way we can get out of this alive. Theoretically. That's the plan. You go in there, and that's Zen. The alien world where basically you're just straight up 100% on another planet. Dimension. I don't even know. It's trippy. Yeah. And from this point, now, in the original, this is largely where they differ. As I kind of mentioned, there's like the whole thing with Gonark. It is so much more involved in Black Mesa, but for the most part, you're basically just trying to get to the center of this place and find this giant floating alien thing that speaks with you telepathically, and man, it's creepy. Yes. But you gotta blow it the heck up, get your butt out of there. I believe you can even defeat it just with the crowbar. I'm pretty sure I've seen a crowbar-only run of Half-Life.
Oh my
Zach,
god.
do you know?
I have no idea, but if someone pulled it off, they are freaking insane.
Yeah, well, the thing about defeating this guy is he's like up really high in the air, and you had to do like some crazy like jumps and stuff in order to pull it off. But you could do some really wild stuff in Half-Life, like in particular with speed runs. A bit of a side tangent here, of course, during our spoiler section. Like they didn't have any cap for how fast you could go backwards, so people bunny hop backwards in order to pick up ridiculous speed. And that's how they use it to get faster. They play the game facing the other way. So anyway, you defeat this thing, everything starts blowing up, and the next thing you realize, you wake up in like an interdimensional version of the opening tram that you took going to work, and you're in front of a man in a suit called the G-Man, who, if you've been paying attention, was actually watching you in several places in the backgrounds of multiple environments throughout the entire game, which is creepy. I saw him at one point during my playthrough in Black Mesa and actually tried to pop him in the head just to see what would happen, and it went right through him, I think. Yeah. So, yeah, he's... we don't even really know what the heck this guy is. There's more in the lore, obviously, later. But still, this very mysterious guy says that whatever you've done has impressed his employers, and they would like to hire you. And you could choose either that or death. And you actually get to choose. So if you choose death, I believe he teleports you into a pit of, like, bloodthirsty aliens, and they just shred you to pieces, and you die.
Yeah.
The end.
The G-Man offers you a choice. It's like, either you accept my job, or I will put you in a situation you cannot hope to win. So if you just sit there in that tram, he closes
or
the
step
door.
off the... Or if you step off the tram, you accept his deal, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
so you get to sit on the tram.
Right, if you stay on it, he closes the door and says, I'm sorry, we couldn't reach an agreement. And like you said, there's like a battle pit of like all these grunts and vortigaunts and hound eyes and everything.
Yeah.
Like,
oh my gosh, yeah, the hound eyes. There's so many cool enemies in Half-Life we've been gracing over, but yeah.
Yeah. But once you
step
obviously,
off, like, you could probably see some that we're fighting here on a camera that we don't know is actually happening right now, which, if anything, is keeping us more on topic, because we're already going to be going overtime here.
Yeah.
For the most part, that's basically the end. You can accept his deal. We don't know what the heck his deal is, and then boom, that's Half-Life. Yep, that's the game. It's a really cool, wild, weird story. I love that it doesn't ever really try to resolve anything, and it does leave itself open with Half-Life 2, which of course has tons of questions to it, and there's still a reason why people want Half-Life 3 because they're not done. There's still more to go.
I want a Half-Life 3 so bad.
Oh yeah, I know. There's actually a lot of talk right now about a Portal 3, because one of the developers has been asking Valve about it, but if anything, that just shows that they're not doing it, So, really is a shame. At least Half-Life Alyx was a thing, but granted, it was only because they're trying to sell their new VR systems, but
yeah.
Regardless. Anyway, for the most part, that's really just the story of Black Mesa and Half-Life. I really like it. I think it's really solid for what it is, especially for like just a crazy game to just get people talking. It's an experience, is what it is.
Yes, yes, and the thing I love about it is that Mark Laidlaw, who was a fiction writer before this, really helped the team out in trying to plan the overall story and the overall flow of the game, where he actually worked closely with them in order to make sure that the experience was as seamless as possible for 1998.
And it definitely is.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's really solid. So anyway, moving on to our next segment, the music. So, this is something that, Zach, I'm going to let you just cover specifically about the original Half-Life, and then I'll talk about Black Mesa.
Okay. So, the music. There is a surprising lack of it in the original.
There is, yeah.
Because it's, again, all about that immersion. It's all about the ambient sound, you know, where it's like you're hearing pipes burst, steam hissing, you're hearing gunshots, and you're hearing the jarheads, like, communicating over radio about your location and the enemy. And when the music kicks in, it's like a Dark Souls or Bloodborne, where it's like, you know, some serious shenanigans is about to go down. Like when you're going up the elevator to fight the jarheads for the first time, the government.
You can hear the choppers,
Yes. So it's like the music starts kicking in, and it's a very techno house kind of sound, very 1990s. And I love it for when it's there, and then you kind of get sad when it's gone, and then you're like, oh wait, no, there's aliens. I gotta defend myself now.
Right, and then it just makes those moments when the music kicks in really crazy.
Correct.
And luckily, Black Mesa does the same thing, and it largely keeps those segments. However, once you get into Zen, I believe, you basically have a soundtrack basically the whole way through.
Ooh,
and
that's
which is
cool.
Probably for the best, because Zen is already like so visually beautiful, and it's supposed to feel very, very different than the real world that you were trying to struggle through and survive up to this point.
Right.
And yeah, you still got your banging music when like you enter like this crazy area where you've got a bunch of choppers all after you, and it's like a hopeless situation. But really, what's going on is Gordon Freeman's just rolling his eyes and, you know, loading up his shotgun, because this is just yet another footstool in his way. You're just slowing him down. Oh my god. So, yeah, the music definitely does a really good job, and I really love the new stuff that they played, especially for Zen in Black Mesa. It's some outstanding stuff. The original Half-Life, you know, just personally, I don't know what this matters to you, but I don't really have any tracks from this one saved on my computer, and I have an enormous track of, you know, like a folder just full of game music of stuff that I've saved just from, like, video reviews I've done, or just games that I really love and I want to hear, and I just put it all on shuffle, and I just play the stuff. Black Mesa, I've got a ton of it. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah, for whatever that's worth, I really love the Black Mesa stuff. The original Half-Life is, it's okay. You know,
yeah, that's perfectly fine.
It's good for its segments when you're playing it in the game. Is that fair? Like, some of it's like, it's a situational kind of thing, not like, man, I just want to listen to this, you know?
Right, it's not like a lot of video game music where it's like, oh man, yeah, I've got to completely listen to this outside of the game. It's one of those ones that really just is there to lift up what you're playing, you know, lift that moment up, so that way it's like, yes, I am completely in this game and I want to keep playing. Please, music, take me there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it does a great job with that.
Yes.
So we are going to try and speed up here so we don't go over time even farther than we already are. We only have 2 segments left. We're going to try and go quickly through this. So, Sell It. I don't know how much we're going to dwell on this, because I've already basically made a segment of this on my own, saying, like, you know what, if you're into video games and their history, absolutely play the original Half-Life.
Yes.
If you're just into first-person shooters and want to try an interesting, creative one and you're into sci-fi, play Black Mesa. Outside of that, I mean, personally, I don't know how many people are affected by this, but first-person shooters that, like, play with the mouse and, like, spin really quickly, they get me super nauseous. So somebody like me, like, I just fought through this because I needed to play this game so badly.
Yeah.
But if any of you guys, like, have nausea problems when you're playing first-person shooters, like, it's really good. Maybe just go through, like, a segmented run, like, watch my live stream series that I've done instead. But just playing through it that long got me really sick, so I don't know how it might affect you, but this could be totally a me problem. I'm just mentioning it. But Zach, what would you say about either of you, just recommending them in general to what kind of people?
Well, I was going to say, because of this game, we got some amazing concepts out of it. We got Team Fortress.
Yeah.
We got, oh gosh, Counter-Strike out of this. We got the competitive scene out of this, we got so much in the way of fan mods and fan
Clearly
games out of this that it's just, you know, you have this game to thank for basically Hat Simulator 2007, aka Team Fortress 2.
Right.
Again, and that's what I really think this game is really good for. And yeah, is it a little hard to go back to, especially if you've never played it originally, and try to play it with fresh eyes in 2022? Yeah, it's gonna be a little hard, but you know, like you said,
most of the snags are gonna be with weird puzzles, and honestly, I had this happen like 2 or 3 times where the game would autosave at certain moments, and at that very moment, I happened to be at like 1 HP standing in front of somebody with a shotgun, and I would get caught in a death loop where I would like respawn, die, respawn, die, respawn, die, respawn, die, and that's frustrating. You gotta try and like find another save to move backwards to prevent that from even happening. And
I can't tell you how many times I've got stuck in the geometry of the world in the original game.
yeah, it can happen. I mean, especially when the game is designed for you to break the boundaries and do some crazy weird stuff.
Yeah.
It's just inevitably gonna happen, especially with how big it is.
But I would say, though, it's a relatively smooth and surprisingly modern ride if you decide to give the original a shot.
Yeah.
And I still think it's worth playing today, even with Black Mesa being a thing.
Yes, I agree. And that's actually why, when it came to rating it, look at that segue, I personally did a really weird thing when it came to rating this, because I want to individually rate games. I don't want to rate Half-Life and Black Mesa as one thing. I don't think it's fair. Because I think the successes of one are, like, completely irrelevant to the successes of the other. Like, why would I attribute Black Mesa to, you know, being so inspirational to video games as a whole, versus why would I give Half-Life the credit for its graphics and music updates and its lighting? You know, they are successful for totally different reasons in different years, doing different things. So what I ended up doing was deciding I'm going to give, for either Bomb and Hamster, a 9 and a 6, but they interchange both times. Because you would say, I believe it was Bomb who said that the original Half-Life is just like a 6. You know, it didn't age very well. It's not really that fun to play. I don't really want to play it like nowadays. But when it comes to playing like Half-Life, when you go ask Critical Hamster, he goes, no, this game's like a 9. It's so impactful, it's so important, it's so great, and it still holds up. It's still really great for 1998. It totally deserves a 9. And then you move around to Black Mesa, I gave it the complete opposite effect. Hamster says, Bomb says, the positive gamer, this is where you've got to play it nowadays. This is what's playing great, it looks great, sounds great. This is the complete package that you should be playing. Hamster, however, does the opposite, saying, if you're just looking at it critically, it's really like its successes are what the original Half-Life are. And everything else from that is just kind of like borrowed. And it's okay. It's how am I rating a mod? If I'm just rating the mod, it's alright. It's like a 6. So weirdly, like 9 and a 6 got interchanged both times, and that was a way to like say that both are great, but neither are like something you gotta play right this second, if that sounds right.
No, that makes sense, yeah.
Okay. I'm just kind of curious, what would you say a positive / critical Zach?
See, for positive Zach, or personal score, when I look back at it, I'm like, do I enjoy playing this game? Yes. Is this one that I want to keep going back to and playing constantly over and over? Not necessarily. I'd rather go back and play like Doom, or play more like a game like Dust, which is very level focused. But still, though, I still always have a good time with it. It's goofy. This thing is held together with tears and duct tape. I love it. I gave it a personal score 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
And for critical score, this is one of those critical ones I would agree with a lot of people at the time and even today, that this game holds up pretty phenomenally well, and its impact on the industry is indisputable. I give it a critical score of 10 out of 10 in that regard.
I'm not shocked.
You know my proclivities.
Yes. Now, I don't know if you're comfortable with trying to do the same for Black Mesa while I have you here, because we can only do this episode once, but for what you know of it, at least do your best and try and give us a positive and critical, at least of how you feel about Black Mesa.
Positive, at least from a purely visual and from what I've seen from gameplay. Like, just it's basically like you kind of especially if you played the game originally back in the 90s, this is basically the way you remember it as it should probably be played. So
I would say even more grand than that.
Right. I mean, it's because, your memories can deceive you and they make you think, oh, this was so much better, than stuff, than anything else I can play today. When you actually look back at your childhood memories and stuff, you think, oh, yeah, no, that was actually disappointing. But this, like with Black Mesa, you're basically playing the way you remember the game, as grand and as grandiose as you want it to be.
Yeah, I do this a lot with GameCube games. I go back and I think like, oh man, they looked so good compared to the N64, and then of course you're actually looking at a tiny full screen CRT blend composite output. It's not good, but
No.
I remember it looking so grand and so perfect back
Exactly.
on GameCube. So yeah, so that's really what Black Mesa is. It's like the full grand spectacular theatrical performance of what your memories showcased.
Exactly, and so in that regard, I would probably give it like a 9. Just like that edge, like a 9 or
Positive?
a 10 probably. Yeah, for positive. For critical, it is an ordeal to try to basically make a great game in the shadows of something as colossal as Half-Life.
Yeah.
And, because you've got to walk that very fine line between preserving what made the original good and also trying to put your own creative spin on things while not, pissing off either side of the fan base or, potential customer base.
Exactly, and not to interrupt you, but we'll make a whole video just on like what makes a good remake. And if you consider Black Mesa a remake, I consider personally the goal of a remake to make your original obsolete. And if you want to say you want to make a game as impactful as Half-Life obsolete, this is probably where both of us would have given this a lower, or justifying why we're probably giving Black Mesa a critical lower score than our positive scores. That's largely what it is. It's saying like, I just don't see how you're going to make a game like Half-Life obsolete. I don't know how you're gonna, even if it, like Black Mesa, it could not be any more spectacular and grand, and you could tell me there's no reason to boot up the original Half-Life whatsoever. People are still going to do it because that's just how important that game is.
Right. And so, but from what I've seen and from what people have said, it stands on its own as a very technically competent and very well-designed game overall. Even with the bones of the original Half-Life at its base, it still does a really good job. However, like you said, it's not going to make the original game obsolete by any standard, but personally for a critical, I might go for like maybe a 7 or an 8. If depending. Once I play through it, I would probably solidify that more.
If you make it an 8, then I think you did the exact same thing I did, and you doubly rated it, and you flip-flopped your scores for either game.
I did, yeah. Now that you say that out loud, yeah, didn't even realize that.
That's funny, because that's weird, because they are both successes in their own right, but in opposite ways, which is a really good way, or like a reason that I feel like they both needed to be covered together. But at the same time, I think they both need to exist isolated from each other. In the same way that, like, Metroid references Metroid 2 Samus Returns versus Metroid 2 Return of Samus, a 3DS game and a Game Boy game. I don't think it fully made the other obsolete. However, they're both doing completely different things, and I love them both.
Right.
So, in this same right, Half-Life and Black Mesa should both exist. I am very much happy that both exist.
Exactly.
But I still love them for different reasons.
Right. No, that's totally fair.
All right. Wow, that was a beefy episode.
I know, even without the immediate distraction of one of the greatest games ever made.
Yeah, good thing we didn't have that also throwing us over. So, yikes. Either way, we have a lot of different games that I have clearly reviewed on Playing With Myself. Let us know in the comments which ones you would like to see us do. One of these, like, really in-depth, like, talk about the game in full, and give it a really deep dive and just discussion episode so we can just, like, really pull all of the concepts out from those original videos, because I can only say so much in like a 15-minute to sometimes even 10 to 5-minute reviews when I really pack them down. I really just can't say too much, especially when I'm also trying to make jokes at the same time. I'm trying to make the thing entertaining. It's really hard.
Yeah.
Especially in this case, I was reviewing 2 games at once and doing like a green screen joke thing at the very beginning of it. That was, like I said, it was a very involved episode. So I'm glad we got to like fully dissect this and spend some time really talking about Half-Life and Black Mesa. And I'm sure we'll get there again when we get to our 98 episode. So either way, thank you all for tuning into this episode of Hitbox. If you enjoyed the show, you can help us keep it alive by supporting us on Patreon with the links in the show notes and this video's description. For those of you on YouTube, remember to like the video and subscribe for more, and be sure to let us know what you thought of the show and what other topics you'd like to hear us cover in the future. And special thanks to all of our amazing Patreon members. See you.